Okay, the recording has now begun. My name is Will Hull, and this is the West Virginia wildcard team for Unit 2 for Division C. This is the hearing for the We the People National Finals. In a moment, I'll have the judges introduce themselves, followed by the students, and then we'll begin our hearing. Students will deliver a 4-minute prepared statement, followed by 8 minutes of judge follow-up questions. My microphone will be muted during the hearing. However, I will be holding up the 1 minute as well as the time sign to indicate those parts of the hearing that are transpiring. I also recommend, if you're on the Zoom window real quick, up in the very top right-hand corner, there's a little view icon there. If you can click on that and change it to your gallery view, if you're not already on the gallery view, this will allow you to see me hold up those signs. At the conclusion of the hearing, the judges will provide some brief feedback, and then we will conclude. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and pass the microphone over to their panel of judges so that they can introduce themselves.
Welcome, West Virginia, and congratulations for being here. My name is Nick Drummond. I'm an assistant professor of political science at Black Hills State University in South Dakota.
Hello, welcome. My name is Tim Igo. I am a writer, magazine editor, and lawyer, and I work at the State Bar of Arizona in Phoenix.
Hello, my name is Chuck Dunlop. I'm president and CEO of the Indiana Bar Foundation in Indianapolis, Indiana, but grew up in Pittsburgh, which isn't too far from where you are, so geographically speaking. Good to see you all.
I'm Rebecca Williams.
I'm Aiden Gamble.
And I'm Andrew Davis, and we're representing Unit 2 from Mr. Phillips's AP Government and Politics class, and our teacher with us today is Miss Looker.
Okay, fantastic. I'm going to read the question. We're doing Unit 2, Question 2. Let me see if I can get it. I'm using 2 screens here. Let me get it over here on this screen. All right, here we go. So after I finish reading the question and the prompts, the floor will be yours. One founder claimed that representatives should refine and enlarge the public views by passing them through the medium of a chosen body of citizens whose wisdom may best discern the true interest of their country. Do you agree or disagree with this claim? What alternative systems of representation were considered by the founders, and what alternative systems of representation, if any, should be considered in the 21st century? Please begin.
In Federalist Number 10, James Madison wrote that representatives should refine and enlarge the public views by passing them through the medium of a chosen body of citizens whose wisdom may best discern the true interest of our country. I think this claim is true because a representative democracy requires an understanding of the nation's public opinion and views to function properly. If our elected representatives don't know what their citizens want, they'll struggle in representing us in policymaking. America's values include individualism, which allows citizens to advocate freedom of action over the government's control. This chosen body is the state legislators who take part in discerning the public opinion. There are multiple levels of the legislatures that can help in determining our opinions. Legislatures at the national level, state and territory parliaments, and local government authorities. Legislators can hear from their citizens through letters in support of bills or citizens attending hearings or testifying on a bill, for example.
Some of the other systems that were considered for representation were seen in the creation of Congress. There were arguments over whether or not a legislator should be based upon equal representation for every single state, or whether to have it based proportionally to the state's population. The Virginia plan presented by James Madison had a bicameral legislature where it was entirely based on the population. Smaller states disagreed with this plan as they would have little to no say in government. Everything else about the plan was kept, however. Another plan proposed was the New Jersey plan by William Patterson. This instead had a unicameral house and every state had one equal vote. These two plans would come together in the Great Compromise to make the legislature we know today. These questions of representation have appeared in several cases over the history of our country, specifically with the election of the House of Representatives. In Baker v. Carr, Tennessee had not updated their voting districts for over 50 years. This caused each district to be severely unbalanced. Tennessee felt that this was the state's issue to solve. The court ruled against Tennessee, stating that all districts must have similar populations. All people need to have equal representation of power, or they can be left without a voice or a choice to make for our government.
Our current representation systems include proportional representation and equal representation. We can see equal representation shown in the Senate with 2 representatives per state, while proportional representation is shown in the House of Representatives with the number of representatives varying based on population. Equal representation and proportional representation each have their own pros and cons, the pros of one being the cons for the other. Equal representation is fair and equal among all 50 states, but for the citizens in bigger states, representative per citizen is extremely less than smaller states. Proportional representation allows fair representation per citizen, but on the broader state level, it's unjust, which is what makes our bicameral system function so well, is because we use both in a way so everyone is equally represented. In our democracy, the citizens elect representatives or president for the country as a whole. The downside is the lack of direct election. Citizens elect senators and House members directly and electoral voters, but in the presidential election, 48 of the states use a winner-take-all method that doesn't allow all citizens to be equally represented in the states. In the states, Nebraska and Maine both utilize the congressional district method, which prevents the majority vote to be all-powering and divides the electoral votes evenly based on voting percentage. Though in theory, I believe all 50 states should use the congressional district method, in action, it causes the Electoral College to become obsolete and wouldn't allow smaller states to have the equal representation in the presidential election.
All right, well, thank you very much. At this point, we will now begin the Q&A portion. We'll lead things off. I want to take us back to the American constitutional debate. As you know, the Anti-Federalists were very critical of the Constitution, including the mode of representation that Madison seems to be emphasizing here. Whereas Madison advocated for the trustee model, the Anti-Federalists preferred more of a delegate model. Could you explain the difference between these models and maybe say anything more about the Anti-Federalist views of representation?
Well, trustees are meant to be, politicians are trusted to make their own decisions that the citizens are uneducated to make, while delegates are more to represent what the people want and what they would want in decisions.
I'm so sorry. Could you repeat the question one more time?
Sure. So I think he did well, your teammate, explain the difference between the trustee model and the delegate model. So what I'm looking for now is the Anti-Federalist perspectives on representation. Why were they critical of the Constitution from that perspective, the issue being representation?
I think they would feel that these representatives would not represent the people entirely well, and felt like they didn't have their interests entirely at heart, or would do what they want, I guess.
Well, yeah, and I think they just were afraid of the government becoming too powerful, and they didn't want the corruption and the bias that goes into government that we see in play today too.
I wanted to talk to you a little bit, or ask you about the idea of who is voting and how that's determined. You mentioned Baker versus Carr, but the idea of redistricting and creating districts within the House. How do you, I guess, what's your perspective on redistricting? Should it be the political sort of influences that currently are dominant in many redistricting processes? Or is there a better way in order to do that, as far as with the technology and everything and the sophistication of computer modeling and things, where you can sort of almost pick the voters that you want as opposed to the voters picking who they want? What is your perspective on how that process works?
I think redistricting should be the best it can to be not swayed towards one direction in terms of bias or any other way. It should try to do it that way and have each district be as equal as possible in terms of representation from all sides.
I like your perspective on using like electronics and trying to get like the vote out there. I do agree with Aiden though. I think the founding fathers and like representation were trying to get at like most equality that they could in terms of representing the country and voting. And
I'm so sorry. You kind of cut out when you asked the question. Could you repeat it one more time?
Sure, just the idea of who is making the districts for the congressional districts. Should it be an independent commission, or should there be political influences in that process?
I feel like it should try and do the, well, sorry. I feel like it should be tried and done in the most equal way possible. That way it's not severely outweighing in the state overall, because with how it's most states do the winner take all, if most districts are purposely biased where a majority is one way overall, it would cause the state to swing that way, where different positioning of, I guess, where the district's lines are drawn could potentially change the vote.
Thank you.
Could I ask you to talk a little bit about the Electoral College? So it sounds like your opinion would be that the founders' notion that we need to filter people's sentiments through structures like the Electoral College is still effective, even when we see individuals who do not win the popular vote win the presidency. You think the Electoral College still has its place?
Personally, I don't. I think whoever wins the popular vote should be winning the election, because too many times many people who just happen to not be the majority of their state aren't heard at all because of the Electoral College and the winner take all method, which I think is a huge issue.
I agree with that. I think with the Electoral College, it kind of goes towards our freedom of speech. They kind of overlook that. And I do like the Electoral College in the term of that it helps smaller states have a say in votes.
I also agree because, as Rebecca said, the Electoral College allows the smaller states to have the vote when it's the majority difference in that smaller state allows. However, the Electoral College also is just very iffy or questionable when it comes to, it could be a 51 to 49% in a state, and then the 49% of, say, like California would count for nothing. So it almost questions, should you vote against the minority of your state if it's not going to matter at all?
Thank you.
So there are a few county municipal, I can't speak today, level elections where they're actually letting 16-year-olds vote or 17-year-olds vote. What do you think about that, lowering the age? Is 18 kind of an arbitrary number? Would you support that or not, and explain why?
I think,
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I like the voting age being 18 because I feel like that gives us more time to develop our political opinion and ideas and further educate ourselves before we have a say in who we want to vote for.
Yeah. At 18, we are almost completely finished with high school, while at 16 and 17, you barely have, I mean, I feel like most people barely have any knowledge about government and their ideas of what to support.
I agree with the current voting age remaining 18, because I know personally I was very ignorant in government until I started taking the AP Government and Politics class. So I feel like if I were allowed to vote at a younger age, I would not make wise decisions voting. So I feel like after going through the course of high school, you're more intelligible on what to do.
Okay, thank you. Now is the time where we will provide some constructive criticism. I very much enjoyed your opening remarks. I could tell you put a lot of work with that. It was polished, covered a lot of ground. So well done with that. I also thought you did well during the Q&A. Threw you a bit of a curveball there at the end, but all three of you wanted to jump on that one, which was good to see. I would have liked to push you, Andrew, just we didn't have enough time, but I would encourage you to think about your own life. If that civics course was so important for you in terms of acquiring the knowledge you think to be a responsible voter, should we perhaps have in place that should be a requirement? And if so, can you imagine any kind of problems that might emerge associated with that? Just to think critically about that, I think would be an interesting thought experiment for you. But well done overall.
Yeah, I would agree. I also enjoyed your response to the voting age question. And that is an interesting thought experiment. In fact, we might all give thought to whether the us more seasoned older voters are knocking it out of the park electorally or not. So it may not entirely be about age. It may be about education, and you can be educated at any age. So it's a fascinating question. I appreciate your citation to things like Baker v. Carr, a good description of what our system has going for it in terms of having the two houses, and an interesting discussion of the Electoral College and its continued value of harming maybe certain viewpoints, but allowing smaller states to have a voice. It's not an easy question. Well done. Thank you.
Yeah, I will agree with my colleagues on a lot of your presentation. I thought the opening was a really good historical context and overview that sort of set the table for the discussion to come. And it really showed that you understand the fundamentals in a meaningful way, which then leads to sort of your comment also, Andrew, the idea that not everybody does necessarily have those, and then those are the people that are voting, at least a lot of them. And so what do we do about that? How do we ensure that we have an enlightened electorate that is able to make these decisions? And I also just, the idea of the redistricting is how do we select who's voting for who? And the level of sort of sophistication within that process now is a lot different than it was at the founding era. And what role should courts or others have in sort of second guessing those decisions? So there's a lot rolled up into this representation issue, certainly a lot around voting. And I thought I really enjoyed the discussion with you all, and thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, well, that will bring us to the end of this hearing. We're going to go ahead and move the judges out to their deliberation room. If you want to go ahead and say, see you later. And thank you very much. I'll go ahead. Go ahead. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording at this time. Thank you, everyone.